Hi, I'm really excited to bring this Christ Revealed interview to you. Let's go ahead and jump in.
So you said earlier you almost wish that you could accept things from the way you feel from the more emotional perspective. Do you ever have concerns that you might somehow think toward a path that might move you away from where you are right now?
Well, this is something that's kind of there's a theological argument about this, right? I mean, what is really happening here? What I believe happened for me was that I had an enmity toward God. Mm-hmm. And God's Spirit, He removed that enmity from me. And that's when I could actually assess the evidence fairly. I never would have given it a fair shake. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't on my own intellectual prowess that I said, oh, today I'm going to assess the evidence fair. No, it's that God did something that I could not do for myself first. And that's what opened the door. The evidence is not, it's just a means to an end. It's a means that God used to that end, but it was God who did it. I was being prayed for years. And I know that people like me, my dad is like me, and he is not a believer. I am not going to talk him into this. Right. But I can pray him into it, because at some point, if I pray him into that position where he's receptive, that's something I can do. I cannot do that. I cannot get him to be receptive, but God's going to do that. I simply have to be asking God to do it. And while I'm asking, I'm going to be modeling Christ for him. But at some point, when he moves into that position where he has ears to hear, I can't make him have ears to hear. Mm-hmm. God does that. But then I can voice the case I just explained for you and for myself. And at that point, I do believe he will hear it, because he cannot resist this force of God acting in his own life. Mm-hmm. But again, that's not that the evidence has this mystical power. Right. It's the same evidence people have been looking at for 2,000 years. It's that God has to first do something to make us receptive.
So your passion, your focus, your energy now is really in a highly charged, I mean this in a positive way, state.
Right, right.
What, do you feel like you're at your best when you are being a pastor, when you are sharing the message? When do you feel like you're at your best?
I think everyone's shaped so differently, right? And people will say to me, well, I don't have that gift. Mm-hmm. I don't have a lot of gifts either. I mean, I know what my gifts are and what they aren't. I pastored for a number of years, but I think I'm probably more of a teacher than a pastor. I think pastors are incredibly special and highly underappreciated. So I have a great respect for pastors. It's a hard job, and those who do it well are just amazing, okay? So I just have learned that I have these limited things I can bring to the table. But that's not unlike all of us. Mm-hmm. All of us have something that we have. Who would have thought that my background was I was a designer. Mm-hmm. And I never would have guessed, as a designer as a kid and through undergraduate school, then I became an architect. Mm-hmm. And I went to grad school for architecture. You wouldn't have told me the year I was entering my master's program for architecture, hey, Jim, someday you're going to be a cop. Okay? I didn't know, I didn't see that coming. But it turns out I used a lot of that design process, that interest in the arts, to communicate cases to juries. So it turns out that those gifts that I developed early on were not lost in my 5 years working in law enforcement. But who would have guessed, if you'd have caught me 5 years into my law enforcement career and said, hey, someday you're going to be a believer, I'd have said, no way. Everyone who knew me would have said no way, but here we are years later. Both the design gifts, hopefully, and the law enforcement gifts are being used in this stage of life. Well, all of us are at some point in our lives where the gifts are being assembled so we can use them to do this work. And I'm not a PhD, but I'll tell you something, and people who kind of experience Christ and who are believers, we have a tendency to think, well, I can't do that, Jim, because I don't have a PhD. I don't have a background in neuroscience. I don't have a background in cosmology. I don't have a background in biology. Clearly, I don't either. But it turns out that the people who get to vote in jury trials are not the expert witnesses. They're the lay people we put in the box. As a matter of fact, if I knew you were an expert, I wouldn't put you in that box. Why? Because you will allow your expertise to cloud your thinking. You probably can't be told very much. I need you to openly assess what the experts are saying. And if you are an expert, you may not be so fair to those experts. Number two, you'll notice that when I call an expert to trial, he is testifying about a piece of evidence. Well, the next defense attorney does not bring in a bunch of new evidence. No, typically the defense attorney uses the same evidence that I brought in. He just calls a new PhD who says the exact opposite thing of this PhD. So now you have the same piece of evidence, two very good, honest people, honest PhD professionals, and I have great respect for the expert witnesses we call, but they clearly don't agree on this piece of evidence. Right. Who gets to decide which of these two PhDs is actually telling the truth?
A non-PhD.
layperson.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
So in the end, I think we're in a great position, And don't be inhibited by the fact, we can't be inhibited by the fact that no, I'm going to read like crazy. I wrote a book called God's Crime Scene. I read 132 books of all the skeptics before I began writing that book. You got to read. But in the end, don't underestimate the power of a layperson to assess a case. We use it all the time.
So you've got some decades on this planet, and you're doing the work you're doing now. Mm-hmm. Do you think that right now that Christianity is more under attack than it has been in the past, say, 20 or 30 years, or do you feel like it's being embraced more?
Well, I think we have to be careful when we use the word attack, right? Because every time you talk about, well, is Christianity under attack, I think it's fair for people to say, come give me a break. You want to see where Christianity is under attack? It's not in America. We have people being crucified still in other places on the planet. That's where Christianity is truly under attack, and I get that. Right. But I think what I do see in our culture is that it's waning in its influence in culture. At least we can agree on that.
Yes.
Now, whether we agree there's this overt, concerted, kind of coordinated attack on Christianity, I think that would be overstating it for sure. But what I do see is that there are wedge issues, right? It's the moral teaching of Jesus that's going to become, the moral teaching of the New Testament, that's going to become more and more unpopular. And there's only going to be a couple of ways to respond to this. Mm-hmm. One, we can say nothing and kind of hope that it kind of goes by, just stay silent, don't even talk about those issues. Two, we could just acquiesce to everything and decide that whatever we know is true from the teaching of Scripture and we've affirmed for 2,000 years, we're now going to abandon in light of a new sexual revolution that we're experiencing. Or three, we can be faithful in what's going to feel at times like a loss. We can be faithful in what feels at times like there's no way we can win this. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably where we need to be. Regardless of what happens, the measurement cannot be, well, can we elect so-and-so? Really? That can't be the measure. The measurement's going to have to be, can we remain faithful in our families and in our communities in spite of the fact that the very core beliefs we hold are going to be less and less popular. And they were not popular to begin with. They weren't popular in the Roman Empire. Mm-hmm. And Jesus talks about this. So I think we've got good teaching in Scripture that can help us. What's happened, I think, for the most part, is that many of us have been raised in a Christian culture that accommodated Christianity quite nicely for a number of years, and we got soft. Mm-hmm. We got comfortable. We got it kind of where the majority of people would believe this worldview is true. That's going to shrink. Mm-hmm. And I was not one of those people who believed it was true. So I'm okay with, I'm comfortable with the idea that this is going to become, God's going to do what God's going to do. Mm-hmm. And the reality of it is I think we have to be more and more comfortable with discomfort.
Thanks so much for joining us for this interview, for taking this Christ Revealed journey with us. Remember, if you haven't already, subscribe. That way you'll get notified about all the new content that's coming down the road. Comment. People want to hear from you, and then maybe you'll encourage somebody else to make a comment. If you did like it so other people know that it's something good for them to watch. And finally, share this. Send links to other people that you know and care about. Cost you nothing but maybe a few seconds of your time, but it might have a massive impact on their life. Anyway, really excited to be able to share this information with you. Thanks for tuning in.